Okay, welcome to week 2, everybody. This week I'm going to go over very quickly some of the key items from the 7 Habits book that you need to understand from the overview in order to really understand habits 1, 2, and 3. But because you read the overview, I want to make sure that these habits, well, not these habits, these elements of the habits, those are clear before you start diving into those the 3 new habits. So some of the terms that are important for you to understand right now in this video. So the 3 P's and the V, paradigms, perceptions, principles, and values. And so really what we're kind of talking about there is you have to think as though, well, you don't really have to think too hard because the idea is that nobody really knows what they're doing, which is really kind of accurate in the fact that if you think of everybody, kind of walking around blind, right? That's why he's squinting. His eyes are like, he's like that. Because he's squinting really hard, trying to figure out what it is he's looking at, and he's trying to make sense of the picture. That's us going through life, right? And so, what Covey kind of suggests here is that we all have a lens that we see through, right? He calls those our paradigms. So think of this as actually a lens, so maybe like a magnifying glass. So that's the big old lens that this person is looking through. You can see that they look right through that. And this is their paradigm, right? Their lens. And what those lenses give us then are perceptions. But what does he call perception? I don't think he gives much of a name to perceptions. I think he talks pretty bluntly about perceptions. He gives an example about how he was on this subway, I believe it was, and he saw a guy that was, his kids were just kind of going crazy, and he couldn't control his kids, and the kids were bothering everybody else on the subway. And then Covey kind of comes over and says, like, hey, cover your kids, take care of your kids. And then, of course, the guy comes back and says, well, you know, my wife just died, their mother just died. Um, that's why the kids were being crazy, and that's why the guy was just kind of out of it. And so that kind of changed his perception. And so that's the thing about paradigms is that nobody's perfect. All of our paradigms are kind of cracked, if you would. Put a little Harry Potter lightning bolt. That represents a crack because those cracks in our paradigms, they're giving us skewed perceptions, right? So if you look through a magnifying glass with a big old crack in it, you're not going to be able to see very clearly. Well, that's the thing about these perceptions is that when we see perceptions, we're seeing them through our own lens that we've developed through life, right? And so to give you an example, I was coming out of Starbucks, and my wife, actually she was driving, but we were on a trip somewhere, we were coming back, and we had pulled out of the Starbucks, and we got behind this car, and the car just stopped, and there was nobody coming. It was kind of a busy freeway when we got this opportunity to get out. Nobody was coming on both sides. You couldn't see anybody, and they just kind of like stopped, and we're like, WTF, like what's going on? And so then she just kind of waves us by, and I'm like, this MF. Why can't you just go? And so then, of course, that's my perception. My paradigm was cracked based on what I had seen, what I was observing, and what I had seen in life. And in my perception, she was just being arrogant and getting in the way. She was down on her phone, didn't want to leave yet, and didn't want to get out of the way. And so she was just kind of waving us by so she could do her own thing whenever that was causing us a lot of problem because it wasn't a really big area for us to get around. Well, my perception changed whenever we pulled around the car and then we saw smoke coming out of the hood. And of course, well, that changed everything, right? All of a sudden, it wasn't a person just being irresponsible or inconsiderate. Now it was a person with a problem, and you know that was me kind of being a jerk because of what I was perceiving. And that's the same thing that Covey was talking about in the subway. So That's what we're talking about. My paradigm, my lens was cracked because I was seeing it in a skewed perception, and that skewed my it caused me to see a skewed perception. And so now, this is where Covey kind of comes in and says we have our principles, right? These are things like fairness, ethics, morals, honesty. All those kind of traits of humanity, the good traits of humanity that we're trying to navigate and be moral people, be ethical people, be fair, be all the things in this class particularly that come from a good leader, right? And so we're trying to navigate those things and navigate what he calls territories. And so one thing I didn't really mention is that he says these lenses here, these act as our maps. They're our lens, our paradigm, our maps, right? They help us to see, to get around. Because remember, we're blind, we're squinting, we can't see, and so it gives us a map so that we can kind of guide our way through the territory that we're trying to perceive. And so in my story, whenever I was driving around behind this person, I was trying to, I guess the paradigm, or excuse me, the principle that I was trying to navigate there was more of kind of a justice type of thing. Like, this person's being inconsiderate, and there needs to be some kind of justice, right? Get out of the way. Don't be inconsiderate. I guess consideration was one. Just being maybe ethics, just not being inconsiderate and causing people around you problems because you want to be on your cell phone, right? You can kind of apply that to just about any principle you want. I was trying to navigate that, but I didn't have the right lens. I was looking at it through a cracked lens because I wasn't taking into consideration the situation. So anyways, back to the principles, those territories. So imagine a mountain range, right? And inside this little cove here, you can walk. You can kind of go in here and walk in between the mountain range. That's kind of like the bottom of the mountain where you can walk in, and it's like this gulch, right? And so you can go in there, but you can't see anything, right? Because you're blind. You need a lens, a paradigm, to help you understand how to get around these principles, right? How to navigate these. And so these maps then kind of act as values. What do we hold dear inside? And then for me, what I held dear was this justice, this consideration, this ethic, right? This, well, the ethic, moral, whatever you want to call it. Maybe fairness even. It really depends on how you want to define that. But those values are what help us to understand these principles, right? You need these values in order to be a moral person. You should probably be ethical. You should probably be honest. You should probably be considerate of others, things like that. And so that's what these values, these maps, help us to understand these principles. The principles are made up of certain things. Let's say a principle is morality. The values that we're talking about here if we have a skewed view of honesty or fairness, maybe, for instance, I don't know, something that pops into my head right off the bat is maybe white lies. You tell these white lies because you're trying to get people to do the right thing, or you're trying to establish a boundary for yourself. Well, that kind of damages the territory, right? That's not exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about morality. When we're talking about honesty, not exactly talking about. White lying doesn't really fall into that category. So you have to figure out, how do you want to approach that, because you have a map that may or may not be wrong, right? And so that's kind of what we're talking about here with paradigms, perceptions, values, and principles. Make sure I talked about all of them. Paradigms, perceptions, perceptions, principles. Oh, values, right? Yeah, there. And so those four items are what help us to understand the habits of being proactive, and then beginning with the end in mind. And what was the third one? What are we talking about here? Third principle. I'm missing one. There. Oh, putting first things first. That was kind of like the creation part. But anyways, So these key terms, these are very important in understanding these three habits. And so I want to take a little time to kind of explain what is he talking about when he's talking about paradigms, when he's talking about values, when he's talking about principles, um, and what else? Oops, screensaver coming on there. I lost you. And perceptions. So anyways, if you have any questions, I'm going to post this video, and then I'm going to post a few more on mission statements and quadrants and self-determination theory. But anyways, that's paradigms, perceptions, values, and principles.